Hello and welcome to the Last Mixtape podcast. My name is Stephen White, and on this week's show, we discuss AI, Tool, our content factory, and the latest music from the week that was. But first, hello and welcome back to this week's edition of the Last Mixtape podcast. And this week I have been musing on AI, the benefits and the dangers. Yes, a very deep topic indeed, so we'll try to keep it as myopic as I can and kind of hone in on certain aspects of AI in its relation to art as a whole, but obviously to music as well. And this is hot on the heels of a recent case that's come up. So I'm just going to quote from the source of The Guardian and an article called "Music Labels Sue AI Song Generator Suno and Udo for Copyright Infringement." Sony Music Entertainment, Universal Music Group Recordings and Warner Records have sued AI companies Suno and Audio for copyright infringement, alleging that the AI music startups are exploiting recorder work from artists Chuck Berry and Mariah Carey. The lawsuit claims Suno and Audio software steals music to spit out similar work and asks for compensation of $150 per piece per work. So this is quite an interesting topic that's happening at the moment. It's not just happening in music, it's also happened in film. You saw the writer's strike there last year in film and television and the Writers Guild. It's a very interesting thing because AI, much like I suppose the comparisons can be made to computing, the printing press, all of these types of things, with the internet, these huge jumps in technology and how they affect the world around it and how they affect art, how they affect music, how they affect how it's made. And I suppose just to start off, I want to talk about some of the benefits I see in AI. And I think a lot of people would probably be on the same page with this in terms of AI as a tool. And maybe that's what we can talk about here as AI as a tool rather than a machine to spit out content. To use an ugly term, and we'll kind of get into the terminology a little bit later on. But I think that idea of it being a tool, so if you're somebody who uses film editing audio, or if you're using audio equipment and you're editing there, you can see it with the recent Peter Jackson Beatles documentary where they used AI in order to clean up the audio. On photo apps or photo editing software such as Lightroom, AI has been used to help with the editing process. And these are useful tools because the editing in these cases, and we're not talking about the editing of films or movies, but editing as in touching up pieces or helping you to clean up audio and stuff like that, is just a laborious part of it. It's not a creative part of the process. It's just something that sometimes has to be done. So let's say if there's a way of AI identifying a ring and a snare, and it can just take that out for you rather than you spending hours EQing it out, that's going to be the better one. It's, you can see that change from the analog to digital in Pro Tools from, let's say, things like SSL, analog desks. So that's a huge help. That's something where you've trained AI to do something to help with creativity, which means that, artists can create music quicker, get to the point of creation a lot smoother and easier, and it's not as prohibitive or time prohibitive for the artist. Another one, obviously, is accessibility, and it's one I've been kind of musing on because as somebody who's passionate about photography, I would imagine there is and this is another case where we can talk about AI-generated photography. Now, I have my reservations about that and the terminology. Would I call these things photos? No, I would not call them photos. There's no interaction with the camera. There is no, lenses, no use in that kind of way. And you can, make those arguments about mirrorless, and digital, and analog again with film. But the act of taking a photo isn't being done there. But it is creativity, and I think people will find ways to use AI to make creative images or make creative music, and really, as I say, use it as a tool rather than the machine. And I think in accessibility terms, if let's say you were a photographer your entire life and maybe you get older or something happens and you get an illness in which you get something maybe like arthritis to your hands and you can no longer hold a camera, or you can no longer take a photo, or maybe you're not able to go out and do portraits like you used to, or maybe a myriad of reasons. But in that instance, how amazing would it be for that person who can no longer hold or shoot a camera to be able to tell a computer or something the ideas, the visual ideas they have, and be able to refine them and create them and still participate in the creation of art, rather than just having to go, well, I can no longer do this anymore. It's not something that's available to me. So I think those are things that are such benefits, and that's the kind of side of it that I love, that it's it as a tool. Now, the idea of that being called photography, no more than I would call a painting a photo. I wouldn't call that a photo, but I think it's still visual art, and it's still engaging in visual art. It's just how we categorize those two things and how we separate those two things. I think that's where the rubber hits the road in terms of AI and its usage. And this kind of talking about it really as the idea of it spitting out artwork or spitting out music that sounds like these artists is where the danger lies in an already oversaturated music market. I think the idea then comes down to the music industry itself rather than musicians, and business, and how those two things interact. People who are in the business of making films, people who are in the business of advertising, people who are in the businesses where they would rely on music being made for their adverts or for their films or whatever, or just music itself, maybe big record labels that just want to pump out the hits and make the money. How do those people interact with AI? And that's a concern for me, because one of the things that worries me about this AI music and AI generated art in any sense is that, not to generalize, but I'm gonna, it has this tech bro mentality with dreams of creativity and their idea of what creativity is, which is this equation, basically. Their dream would be to break down the creativity of artists and the output of artists into an equation, X plus Y equals Z. If I take this one element, feed it into a machine with this element, I will get out Z, and Z is my creation. You know, I tell a song to sound like Nirvana, mixed with the Arctic Monkeys, and I get this song, and I'm being creative, and that's my creative output, and it belongs to me. And I think that, in a way, in kind of a sideshow almost, is probably one of the big appeals. And now I was talking earlier about the idea of people being creative and getting creative with AI. I definitely think that that's something that can be done, and it can be, you know, honed, and they can make pieces of art and pieces of music that are actually totally original through their own processes and how they actually use it. But for the kind of people who are cynical, unimaginative, uncurious people that, you know, let's be honest, live in these worlds, the idea of ownership, this kind of idea of, you know, business mentality of what you do has no worth. Music has no worth. Art has no worth. The artist has no worth. The piece, I can just take that. That's mine. I can take your voice, and I can take, you know, Chuck Berry's and Mariah Carey's, or we saw it with Tupac and the Drake thing and stuff like that. I can take your voice and I can make this with it. And why not? Why can't I? This kind of egocentric look at themselves and look at art itself, this devaluation. It doesn't have a value, so why can I not steal it? And in fact, they probably don't see it as stealing because they see it as something for themselves. And I think that's incredibly problematic, because then what you will see is, well, I don't need to get an artist. I can just tell this computer to create whatever it is I want. And I know what the argument about that would be. Well, they will say, well, musicians have always stolen ideas and music from other people and influences and stuff like that. And that's a huge argument between influences, inspiration and copyright and theft. And that's one that's been going on in music for years. Look, you can say the British blues invasion in the 1960s into America, bands like the Rolling Stones, etc., were taking music that already was American from African-American communities and bringing it back. Elvis, you know, with Muddy Waters and stuff like that. The problem is with that's a different discussion in terms of, in those instances, the thing that they were taking off it, they didn't end up sounding like, because they ended up putting themselves into it. Their own experiences, their own ways of playing, their own interpretation eventually led to their own types of takes on that genre and types of music and types of songs that, yes, use the influences, but through their own human creativity. In fact, like with stuff with like the British invasion, blues and jazz jamming in the UK and stuff like that would eventually lead to progressive rock. Which then would like krautrock, post-punk, punk, all of these kind of reactions and reactions to and over and against. I mean, punk was nothing more than rock and roll played quicker and worse, you know. But that idea of people putting themselves into their own inspirations, they may be stealing entire, you know, pieces of, you know, chords and ideas of that, but they augment it and change it, and that leads into a greater discussion. That's the idea of humans discussing things with one another artistically. The machine and the AI is incapable of doing that. All it can do is create a copy of 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 a copy. It cannot put itself into it because it has not lived a life. And the problem with that is, yes, we will end up with this derivative music. We'll end up spitting out this derivative music. But that's again where the kind of the uncreative, uninterested people who do not have or do not add any worth to music come into it, because they don't care. They don't care if it's a copy of a copy of a copy. They don't give a fuck. What they want to do is, I want to put an AI score in my film so I don't have to pay a composer. And I want it to sound like John Williams or Ennio Morricone. I know it does. It sounds like that thing. And there isn't any consideration of what could an actual human do to add to this. They don't give a fuck. There's no respect paid to the likes of Ennio Morricone, because again, it's a machine. It doesn't love the music of those people. What it's doing, it is just taking it as an equation, as I say, X plus Y equals Z, and here you go. So it will never develop or build on the ideas of those artists. All it will ever do is diminish. And where we're at now with this case, and I don't believe for a second, dear listener or dear viewer, that these record companies care all that much about the artist. I think they're getting involved now because they can see that it could be a problem for them. As they say, they don't want an oversaturated market where people don't need record companies at all to spit out this kind of stuff. They can just do it. They can just, you know, these AI companies can just spit out whatever you want, and that might have its own appeal in the larger sense, because whether or not people will know, whether or not people will care in the immediacy. In the immediate thing, if somebody spits out a song that sounds like Sabrina Carpenter's Espresso, and people like that already, and this song sounds like, and let's say it's a completely AI artist with a completely AI sound, but it's told to sound like Sabrina Carpenter, that could become a hit. And where do we land then with that? Because that's when the bull or the horse is left to stable at that point, isn't it? Because it will show these AI companies and these AI people and these business people and non-creative tech bro types of, oh, there's an end product here. You can make money out of this. And if there's money in them dar hills, they will go for it. That's the worry. And that in immediacy for them is money, because that definitely has a worth to them. Well, that's all they care about. But for us and for like a creative whole, and for the survival of artists and people making music and making a living and all of these things, all these dominoes that would fall, we would end up in this almost dystopian world in which machines or AI is creating just the same sort of music over and over and over again, and there'll be, you know, no getting away from it in the mainstream. Obviously, you would have musicians go into the independent era, and there will be, you would hope, a need for it. And I think that's kind of the positive aspect of this. Whilst I don't believe these record companies care all that much about the artist, I don't think anything they've done in the past could tell you so. I do believe that this is a position where the terms can be dictated. That almost like the film writer strike is, okay, this can't be allowed. We can't allow this for a myriad of reasons, for economic reasons, for the people making art, for industry reasons, for cultural reasons. We can't allow that. AI as a tool is absolutely perfectly okay, in my view. AI as a tool to make even more art, I don't mind that at all. As I say, I think people will always make creative and weird things. I've seen some AI art where people have made the weirdest fucking stuff, and that's so cool. I don't mind that at all. As a block to build on, or as blocks in a house, no problem. When it becomes the machine itself, when it becomes a factory, that's the problem. That's the worry, for a myriad of reasons. And I think we should be worried about it, and not to be old man shakes fist at new technology at all about this. As I say earlier, there are definite benefits to it. But we risk losing so much of ourselves if we go down this alleyway, because so much of how music is created, how art is created, is dependent on that. If there are no more full-time artists, there are no more people working full-time at art, honing their craft and defining it. If they become nothing more than part-time artists who have to do a myriad of other jobs to do it, that just brings everything down over time. And we have already devalued music in the past. Let's not kid ourselves. We did that a long time ago. When 99 Cent was put on a single, when we decided that we could download music completely for free, we devalued music. We stream it now. We pay for it maybe on whatever way you want to pay for it. But it's not worth the same it was 30 years ago. Where then can AI take us in terms of that? The next step is the artist completely gets left behind. And what we have is, as I say, a world where machines spit out audio and spit out music, and in the immediacy that may be a benefit for the people who want it to be a benefit, for culturally, artistically, economically, it would be disastrous. AI cannot become the factory. Yes, dear listener, they seek him here, they seek him there, those musos seek him everywhere. Is he in heaven or is he at the disco? That damned elusive Count on Monte playlisto! Yes, the limousine Ryan Jet Flying playlist making wheeling dealing son of a gun has once again returned to the shores of Playlistia to deliver another deep bounty full of the greatest Irish music released this week. In the words of Whitney Houston, I want to dance with somebody, I want to feel the heat with somebody, yeah, I want to dance with somebody, yeah, somebody who loves me. The Count is going to dance straight into another playlist here on the Last Mixtape podcast. Let's do this. Pretty sure that's not what Whitney Houston was talking about. Anyway, beginning this week's playlist picks with Tim Chadwick, Call Me When the Coast is Clear, and a gorgeous track from Tim here, which is texturally beautiful, lush production, and all beneath his enchanting voice, perfectly set in a far-reaching ending, a song that just builds and builds and builds to a huge crescendo, and it is a beautiful piece of music, and it is a beautiful single from Tim, and I have to say, one of the best releases from him that I have heard. And yeah, far-reaching, big production, big sound, you gotta love it. Tim absolutely knocks it out of the park on this one, and that is Call Me When the Coast is Clear by Tim Chadwick. Do check it out, hopefully on the playlist or just on Tim's thing or whatever you want to do. Next up we have Ailse and her brand new single Meow. A fast favourite here on the Last Mixtape podcast. I was listening to this track and I was like, I really like this. There's a myriad of reasons why I really adore this track. It's different. It's a different type of sound. It's hard hitting. It's fun. It's irreverent. I think she's really doing something different on the Irish music scene. The Irish music scene, I think we've spoken about this before, and I don't know if it was in terms of Ailse and her music, but we're often say the Irish music scene can be guilty of, sometimes, being a little bit myopic in what it allows and what it listens to and what it kind of takes in. Because it's like, this month we're into just post-punk bands with long wool black coats and nothing else. We won't listen to anything else. And for a while there, back in the bad old days, it was just two guys with electronic things doing stuff in the Bernard Shaw. And it was horrible. But I do like that she's somehow kind of insisted herself into the Irish music scene and into the pop scene as well, with a sound that is different for both the mainstream and for the kind of the cool, what do you think's going to win the Choice Music Prize this year, people? You know what I mean? Like, she's like, by mixing kind of metal and pop, the big screams in it. It's a song, I should say, as mentioned, about her cat, which I really love. I think that's so much fun. I think it's really fun, and I really like that somebody's coming in and taking a music that sometimes kind of put to the side in the Irish music scene, such as the metal scene, bring it into the pop scene as well, and kind of becoming undeniable, which I really like. So yeah, that's Ailse and her brand new single. I was going to do a meow thing, and I'm not. But I was going to do it. For a second, if you're watching it on YouTube, you saw a moment where I was about to do it and I didn't. The song is called Meow, and it's fantastic, so do check it out. That is Ailse. Next up, we have Kinsey, the return of Kinsey, actually, a very welcome return from her. And her next single, Stereo Games. And here is an interesting one as well, because Kinsey's kind of, I think last year, maybe a year before, we had a track from her. And she's one of those building, rising artists that you could just see is just on the precipice, because she's an amazing songwriter. And in this song, it's quite big. It's a big production. It's kind of widened the scope of her music. Still has that gritty sound, but I think it's the grittiness of it is taken from how she delivers the vocal, and as well just like the attitude and the lyrical way she kind of brings things in, like references to Dionysus and things like that. I think she's quite light-footed in how she writes and puts it into these big productions, these big sounds, these edged kind of like almost, you know, the aftermath of like lo-fi rock, noise rock kind of type thing, and really puts it into a sound that is this time round a huge sound and you know, big kind of radio sound almost for her. So yeah, Stereo Games by Kinsey. It is a great track. Go and check it out. Next up, we have His Father's Voice and their brand new single, The Blues. Now, we featured this band only recently on last week's podcast, and it's the first time I had heard them, and I've really, really enjoyed what I've heard since then. And this next song is no different. It's edged, it's snarled, it's a bit nasty, it's a bit brooding, it's powerful. We were talking about with Ailse of the idea of a sound not being conventionally what either the Irish mainstream likes or what hipster people who give a fuck about what wins the Choice Prize will care about. And and you know, this kind of like the idea of the Irish music industry kind of like being kids playing football where they all run for the ball at the same time. And I really like these guys because they really add something new to the kind of the indie sound and the Irish sound at the moment. They have a kind of a hard-hittingness to them. They have a grit to them. There's a kind of a gothic element of what they do. And as an elder goth, I do appreciate that. So, His Father's Voice, The Blues, is on the playlist. And you should check it out on the playlist or wherever you want to check it out. You can also check it out on all their stuff too. I will not begrudge you that. The Count of Monte playlist, though, is a forgiving God in many ways. Anyway, Modern Love and their brand new single, Yours. Now, this is a band, we're talking about bands on the rise, and these guys are really hitting it at the moment. And what I really like about this is it's big, ambitious, widescreen pop from them. They are pretty much like in the kind of indie pop realm, all pop realm. And the sound of this as well, it's like a few of these this week. It's like the widening of the scope, the refining of the sound, the making it bigger. Like obviously when you're playing with music, you only really have a certain amount of frequencies, a certain amount of like scope. So how you make things bigger is by sometimes making other things smaller, making things kind of have an aspect to them, giving space to elements to breathe. And these guys are really good at that kind of push and pull into the big choruses, into the big verses and stuff like that. And yeah, they're one of those bands that keep improving and keep releasing great music, and you can just feel it just coming on for them because they're a great band. Modern Love, the single is Yours. Check it out as well. And finally, at the end of the playlist picks, we come to Laura Elizabeth Hughes and her brand new single, Casual, a return from Laura Elizabeth Hughes as well. And this is quite a gentle, introspective, handmade and warm sounding track. And what's beautiful about it is its use of harmony and how it weaves that around this kind of gentle, light-footed, tiptoed sound. You know, it has this real kind of you know, daybreak kind of sound to it and kind of warm indie folk thing. You could see this on like Spotify playlists for that. I actually brought a lot of my own Spotify playlists as well, and I love it. It's just great songwriting, great performance, great production, great use of that kind of the studio as a tool for those harmonies and those sounds. And I think this is a great track from Laura Elizabeth Hughes, and not to be trite or cliched, but yeah, probably her best work to date as well. I think she's really come out of the gate swinging with this song. I really love it, so I hope this is the start of a string of more releases from Laura Elizabeth Hughes, because this is a great track, and it's Casual. It is on TLMT's Irish Mixtape on Spotify. The count has done for this week, but he shall return next week, dear listener. The Count of Monte playlist, though, always delivers, and he shall deliver next week with another beautiful bounty of Irish music on the playlist. Yes, dear listener, before we go, a couple of gig shout-outs. One for Paloma Faith, who's playing the Ivy Gardens on July 21st, and what an amazing show that will be in an amazing setting. I absolutely adore the Ivy Gardens as a live venue, and by all accounts the gigs this summer have been amazing, so do get yourself down to that. If you're a fan of Paloma Faith or you just want to go out and see some great live music in a beautiful setting, do it there. Also, a big shout out to the guys in Thumper who are playing the Workman's Club on July 23rd. Great band. Do check them out because they are very cool, and yeah, great to see. Go see them live because they're really great live as well. And so it goes, and there it went. But before I go, thank you for listening to Last Mixtape Podcast. You can subscribe to us in all the usual places and or subspaces, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of those places. You can also submit your music and gigs to me at Stephen@thelastmixtape.com via the subject matter TLMT podcast. I'll be sure to check it out, or I will pass it on to the Count of Monte playlisto. But for now, that was the Last Mixtape Podcast. You're the listener. I was Stephen White. Hey, so long.